And welcome back. We're moving into our first segment for the morning, Sex and Sexuality Education for Vulnerable Population. We've got reps of BFLA in with us. As a matter of fact, we've got the Executive Director in with us, Joan, Burke, Skeen. She's in with us, looking great as well. And Director of Programs and Education, Director of Program and Education, Kylah, Ciego. You guys are looking so beautiful this morning. There was a memo out, huh?
Oh, yeah. Great morning.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so the conversation is something, especially for families, it's very hard to eventually get to that three-letter word and talking about it and the whats and whatnots. So it's difficult. That from the BFLA standpoint, that's something that they work along with families with. Sex and sexuality education for vulnerable population. Let's dive into it.
Okay, John, you said it's very hard to talk about that three-letter word with family, but it's because of that three-letter word that we have a family.
Yeah,
right?
You're right, like right there.
And maybe because we did not talk about it, right? That is why we end up having some families in the situation, the way that within which we have families. But you're so right. The matter of sex and sexuality is always a challenge.
Yeah.
Even among persons who are engaged in sex, right? And it is not something new. It has passed down from generation to generation. We feel that it is something nasty. It's something that we should not talk about. It's something that should be happening behind closed doors and all the rest of it. And that's the difficulty with sex. When it comes to sexuality, it's even more challenging. Because the minute we start talking about sexuality and issues of sexuality, immediately people think that it has to do with homosexuality. And that makes it even more difficult because persons are not open. We have closed mind whenever we hear about sex, and it is extremely difficult for families. When we look at, particularly today, what young people have access to in terms of all the gadgets and the social media, Mr. Google is some of our kids' is the best friend because everybody can Google. And what we fail to, as a nation, as a population, we fail to realize is that the world is moving ahead of us because we have this notion, this perception that when we talk to particularly our kids about sex, is encouraging them to go out and have sex. And we have sufficient evidence to show that persons who are informed and well equipped make better choices when it comes to sex and sexuality. There's sufficient evidence to show that. I believe that sex and sexuality should be a conversation for the living room with parents. Parents should be the first teacher for sex and sexuality. But when we look at the consequences of not having the information, we have young parents who are not equipped to speak to their children. So they themselves are at a loss.
The problem.
So it just continues from one generation to the next. And now we are at a point where the consequences is not challenging the country. Never have we seen so many young children in our streets. Never have we seen so many kids begging. we are faced with a situation, and it came out of the mix, where knowledge on issues of sex and sexuality continues to decline. Because we do not have policies or friendly policies that allow persons or organizations such as BFLA to work with young persons in giving them the right information. I want to applaud the Ministry of Education that last year they made the decision to do some revision to the Health and Family Life Education program or the curriculum, because for a long time we believe, oh, HFLE and HFLE is going to cover that. But the HFLE as it existed was grossly inefficient to address matters of sex and sexuality. So there has been a revision. The next step, though, is to equip the teachers. Because when you speak to some parents, they will tell you, teaching sex and sexuality are the responsibility of the teacher. That's why I send my picnic at school, and all the rest of it. But then teachers themselves come out of homes where they themselves are not comfortable. Right? So when we expect them to do it in the classroom,
so if the parents aren't comfortable and the teachers aren't comfortable, then there is an information gap that many times are filled by incorrect sources, friends, the internet. You know, I find Belize is interesting when we look at some of the things that we see in our country. We have a bit of a morality cloak that covers all of us. You know, we're very deeply rooted in. Most people went to religious schools from a very young age. Many people subscribe to different religions. And so we use our morality as the justification as to why we can't and shouldn't speak about certain things. Yet when we look under the cloak, we see that we continue to battle an issue of teenage pregnancy. We have seen more and more coming to the forefront, really, because it's always been happening, issues of sexual abuse and incest and sexual violence, sexual abuse against children and sexual violence against adults. What kind of data do we have to be able to kind of hold a mirror up to the public and say, look, this is what we are facing when it comes to these issues?
Very good question, Marlene. You know that when it comes to reporting and data in Belize, we fail, and we fail miserably. And that's one of the difficulties when we have small societies where everybody are related. So when you go to the police station, it might be the person who is taking the report, maybe your cousin or in-law, you know, and even in terms of having an efficient data management system, a reporting system. The next challenge is that we have there's an increase in the development in rural communities. And so by the time we come across these cases, the persons, they do not want to report. Because there's this feeling that when I report, then what? It's only for data. Who does anything? Okay.
And it tears the family apart.
Exactly.
Because it's usually so close to the family. So
close to the family. When we talk about incest, and incest is not something new.
It's not.
It's not. If we go back and we listen to the stories of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, we learn that 2-3 sisters had children for the same man, right? Or for the
children for the father or stepfather,
or an uncle. And and then now the blame is, as per usual, and unfortunately, the blame is always thrown back to the girl or to the woman. What did you do? What you do? You must wear something inappropriately, or you know, that kind of thing. And so indeed, we have this cloak And we are people of morality when it's convenient.
That's why I said we wear the cloak, but underneath we know there are serious
because
issues.
when we look at situations right now, our young girls and boys are being exploited by pastors, by teachers, people who we hold a certain respect
Of course.
for in our society, and they hold the control, or they believe that the control and the power is in their hands.
Can I ask I think this is such an important issue when it comes to data, because I feel, we all feel better when we're grounded in numbers or in data. But when we look at, for example, the issue of sexual abuse or incest, everybody knows a family or a person within their family who is seen as a predator, Oh, nobody's supposed to go to that uncle's house, or you're not supposed to sit on that cousin's lap. Or when we were growing up, you hear stories from older person. When we were growing up, that uncle you could never visit. So there seems to have been, there are indicators that it is a lot more common than we hope to realize. How does one, and is there any attempt from any agency to be able to put some substantial data together to look at what the situation is when it comes to people affected by sexual violence in the country?
That's a difficult question for me to answer.
Yeah.
I go back to the MIX, the multi-cluster indicator survey. And what the MIX picks up is some of the results of the same issue. So what we haven't done well is to collect the kind of data that is necessary for us to prevent what the results of some of the surveys that we are doing. And of course, it's difficult because these surveys depends on warm bodies. These surveys depend on persons who are willing to speak out, and must be done in a non-judgmental manner. But then also, we just don't want to hear your story. We want to be able to help you.
Yes.
That's true.
And so who is there now? I come and I share my story. Then what? I come and I tell you that Mr. So-and-so, who is my neighbor, molested me. Then what? I'm taken to court. Then the court is not friendly. Right? And so I must go into the court and I must relive the story. When they take off my panty, when they do this and then they do me that, and then it becomes entertainment. Right? And then I have to go back to court over and over and over and over and over because it is a journey, and after that, you know what not?
That's a valid point. And I think also the ethical responsibility you would have to help the victim to overcome the trauma. And we don't, I don't think we have adequate
don't come
professionals
to me just for my story because
but
you want to do a story or you want data. What are you going to do for me? And for the what is in place to address the issues of the perpetrator.
What about data for teenage pregnancy? That we have some numbers for.
Definitely. Definitely.
What is the current situation?
And when we look at the national data, we look at 1 out of every 4 live births, because we know talking about live births. We don't know of the spontaneous abortions or the induced abortions, but we know for live births about 1 out of every 4 nationally.
Wow.
But when we look at, for example, Stan Creek, right? It could be as far as we look at maybe 2 out of every 4.
Wow.
Because Stan Creek is more than the national data.
Wow.
And so again, when we look at issues of sex and sexuality, there is a cultural.
So 25% of the babies born per year are children.
Children. But when we say teenage pregnancy, we're talking along the lines of from 13 to 15, 13 to 16, 13 to 19, being that these are teenagers. What are the age range we're looking at?
And that's why we have, when we do the disaggregation, there is a difference between adolescent pregnancy and teen pregnancy. Because when we look, the age of consent in Belize is 16. Okay? But you cannot access services based on our law. Right? Until you're 18, access services without being accompanied by an individual. So we have to look at the disaggregation. So we look at the number of babies born to persons under 18. Because at 18 you're considered an adult. So the disaggregation, that's what we look at.
You know,
right?
the conversation is, it is for real, and there's so many things happening right now that is not being reported, probably because, or not even probably, because of the stigma and discrimination, because people are not discreet with the information that they get from somebody. And so I don't want to put my child in that situation whereby she might get depressed because people might tease her. We don't even want to raise our hand in the classroom because we will get teased, even though you don't understand what the teacher is saying. And then, because I want to come over to Kylah in terms of the programs, but you know, in finishing up, in the household, men, fathers and mothers might have the different mentality when it comes to your sexuality. And things that are being shown on television today's date, fathers might look at it and discriminate because probably he's not open to it. Mothers might be much more lenient and say, you know what, or it might be a vice versa situation. So what happens to our children in this realm here? They actually get confused. They don't know what to listen to, who to listen to, how to react to their own sexuality. And it boils down now to the programs that are being held at the BFLA. And this is where I want to bring in Kylah. Talk to us about some of the programs or how we are helping parents to eventually try and get their children stable when it comes to their sexuality and feel good about themselves.
Well, BFLA has been in existence from as long as 1985, and BFLA started because of the issues of teenage pregnancy, and it started in Dangriga. I don't think a lot of young people from Dangriga know that. And so that is very important to mention. But as you talk about education, and going back to what Ms. Joan said about revising the HFLE, education needs to be age appropriate, and schools are a viable environment to starting to teach that sexual and reproductive health education. But for BFLA, so BFLA has its youth program, and through the youth program we do a peer education program working directly with high schools and young people. At least that is a little bit more easier to reach population than going into primary level, of course. And so through the peer education program, BFLA has through the years been working with several high schools over the country in different districts and teaching young people to be informed, to know about sexuality, sexual health, and their rights, and more than that, but also rounding them into a holistic individual that is also understands diversity, being respectful, gender and gender-based violence. All of these are aspects within comprehensive sexuality education, and apart from the peer education program, BFLA also works with other groups in teaching sexual health education, and has in the past worked with teachers and through Ministry of Education doing training for teachers in sexual health education, and so those are the two strong areas right now, and we will continue to do that going into 2018, working as well as with teachers to getting them comfortable in having these discussions and relaying information about sexual health and its importance, and continue to working with the youth population, because if we want to build sexually responsible adults, then we need to start with them as young people.
Yeah. So. And education allows for empowerment, and we can't just expect that means your regular academics. It's education about your body and your body functions. Now, we know, and we can't neglect to mention it, that there have been challenges in getting the full rollout of the HFLE curriculum as it was first created before. And my question is, where have we gone since then? Where have we been able to make progress?
Okay, I think as I mentioned earlier, the recognition by the ministry that there was a need
Yes.
for intense review.
Yeah.
So they must be applauded for that. I know that there have been efforts to do teacher training because we have assisted with the teacher training. Last year, we did an entire day or day and a half looking at comprehensive sexuality with the teachers. And it's interesting because it's with those training, then you recognize how much our own personal values and our personal views influence
Yeah.
our positions on certain things.
Yes.
So even at the teacher training level, there are challenges. So we know that there are some teachers who are very comfortable with the information and they will go into the classroom and impart. There are others who they haven't reached that point as yet. So what's going to happen to those children? So yes, with the HFLE, we hope that we can move forward. We have the ministry has a structure in place with the coordinators and all that. That is fine, but it requires resources. One of the things that BFLA would really love to see is, and we have started along with the support of the UNFPA, that comprehensive sexuality education becomes a part of the teacher training at UB. Right, so that when these teachers, they come out and be placed in the classrooms, they are already equipped and already open to the information. And so that is for our young people, for the benefit of our young people who are in school. What happened to those that are not in school?
Yeah.
And that also is a challenge. How do we, as an organization and as a wider society, reach those young persons who are out there? We label them as unattached young persons. They're the ones who are being welcomed by our gangs, being welcomed by many other organized groups who have nothing good for our young people. Kylah did some work with our juveniles in prison, and she can share what are some of the interesting stories that was shared with her. And these are young persons, because we also did some work with through the CARSI project that was funded by the US Embassy. We worked with some of our those in prison, and these are hardcore. They're murderers, no matter how we want to shape it. And but when we go back and we look at where these young people came from, right?
Tell us about it.
Well, I was sharing with Miss Joan a situation, and it's very particular, and it has to do with young persons getting into relationships and not being able to identify when a relationship is unhealthy. The telltale signs of violence, intimate partner relationship and violence, domestic violence, and so they stay in these relationships because they think that is love. And I was sharing with Miss Joan a client that I had at one point, and his partner, who was 17 years old, was pregnant, and for issues that I don't want to delve into detail, she ended up in the hospital having a miscarriage. And when I went to the doctor, on his behalf to kind of, he was concerned about her. And so I went to the hospital to see what's the status of this young lady, and I was talking to the doctor. And the child had malformations already, and the doctor was saying, this person is so young, their body isn't even fully developed. So all these complications and other complications that will continue to follow her, you know, as she steps into womanhood, you know. And so it's very important that we teach about sexuality and comprehensive sexuality education, because it talks about also relationships and being able to learn life skills that will help you. And it will mitigate some of these same issues. I mean, as a young person, getting pregnant early, you are exposing yourself to other complications later on. And I was reading, I think it was from the Ministry of Health, their 2016 report from the HIV statistics, and it had some other information in there. And a part of it mentioned from a study from UNDP, and in which it said that in developing countries like Belize, more than 40% of the girls have their first child before the age of 20. You know, and I could speak an attestment to that, because I got pregnant at 19, you know, but my dynamics and my situation is far different, or it was far different at that time, you know, compared to what other people who experience when they get pregnant at 19 or 17 and so forth. And what that also does is that it speaks to the importance of education, again, of contraception, because if you have a child by the time you're 15, 16, and you guys have seen it in the community, by the time you're 20, you don't have two.
There are statistics. I think if you have a child by 16, usually you have a second by the time you're 20.
And sometimes with different baby fathers.
So these are situations that could be mitigated through proper education, helping young people to make the right decisions.
You know, I think, I would love to say at this point, you know, I recognize my secondary school that I attended, St. Catherine's Academy, which is a religious institution, but I can remember a life skills class as a part of our regular education. You came in as a nurse, and we learned everything that was possible. As a health educator. But we learned everything that was possible to be able to make right choices. And so it shows that even when the institution itself has a religious background, I did religion all the years, I still learned the necessary skills as a young woman.
And you know what, I'm not to cut it, but I'm glad that you mentioned SCA and your experience at SCA, because I can recall prior to us, because SCA was the first high school in this country to embrace a sex education program. And it was as a result of the fact that every year SCA had anything between 8 to 12 expulsions because of pregnancy.
Wow.
And they recognized, and I remember going there for the first time, they were like, oh, you know, we don't want you to mention this, or we don't want you to mention that. And I said, but if the girls, they ask, what do I do? And the counselor at the time went in for my first session, and the questions that were asked by these first formers, that's when they realized, oh no, we can't pretty this thing up. We can't package this. We have to address the issues. And I can tell you that within 2 years, they were down to like maybe 3 expulsions because of pregnancy. Right? And the girls were equipped with the information.
And they did change the school rules as well.
Exactly, they changed the school rules, because at that time, maybe 50 years prior to that, the structure was then
different.
Exactly, but today it's different. It's different, and we have to recognize that.
And that was almost 20 years ago.
Right.
I'm just showing, I use that as an example, just to show that there are some educators, some institutions, that if they don't subscribe to what the naysayers are saying about the HFLE education, they can still adopt it on their own for the young people that they're working with every day. But we have the in-school population. We have I think it's great that you're working with young people who come in conflict with the law. And obviously, I think most organizations are trying to reach out to what we call the unattached youth. But I want to bring a situation to the table at this point, which is the issue that everybody's talking about. It seems to have captured everybody's attention. The current allegation of sexual assault of a minor, but it is being said that he has intellectual disability. What are we doing? This is a very vulnerable population. Yes. And intellectual disability can range from what they call slow learners, right up to somebody who may be unable to communicate and nonverbal. What is being done with this population to equip them?
Okay, maybe 3-4 years ago, and it could even be 5 years ago.
Yeah.
With the support of UNFP, we recognized the need for comprehensive sexuality education for persons of diverse abilities. Okay? And the then principal of what we know as the Stella Maris benefited from training. As a matter of fact, there's a guide to work with persons of diverse abilities. So regardless whether they're slow learners, whatever the case may be. However, in our country, we're limited with persons with the skills to even work outside of comprehensive sexuality education, to work with persons with such challenges. In the homes, there is a challenge for parents or family members to even deal with these individuals. In the schools, it's the same thing. We know for a fact that there's a practice in some of the schools. The minute you have a slow learner, some teachers have this habit of putting them in the back of the classroom.
Wow.
Right? So they are already discriminated against, and so that discrimination then leads to they're being disenfranchised.
Yes, they're being pushed out.
Now, BFLA, we have done some work with Stella Maris. I can recall a parent coming to BFLA with her daughter who is a person of diverse ability, begging us to put her daughter on a contraceptive method. Not because she was sexually active. But the mother said, when I put my daughter on that school bus, she's out of my control.
There's no telling what happens.
Right. And she said, it's hard enough for me having to raise a child of diverse ability. I know I will be responsible for my daughter for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
I cannot even imagine my daughter in this position coming home pregnant and going through with a pregnancy. And I applauded that mother, right? Now, we as a country, we do not take care of our persons with diverse ability. I recognize Miss Eva Middleton and her group because they work with persons, but they can't do it all.
It's a volunteer organization.
Exactly, right. And there are certain challenges, there are certain developmental challenges that they themselves do not have the capacity to deal with. Persons of those challenges then become the responsibility of the state. And as a state, what do we have? Because if we look at it, we have, I think, only Stella Maris. Or NARCI, I think.
We have NARCI as an institution.
As an institution, right, as the school.
And a couple of deaf institutes.
Exactly, right. But imagine, I live in Halakte, and I have a child. And you will find that in communities, certain cultural practices contribute to persons having children
At the-
with challenges.
yeah, with challenges. Yes.
So what happened? That child is kept at home because they can't afford to send that child up here.
So let me ask you, because if we go down this road, I mean, because it is a very critical area that we neglect to talk about.
And persons who abuse in whatever form or fashion,
Yeah.
who abuse persons of these challenges should be dealt with on the double.
Yeah. And the challenge is that some of these people, some of the children cannot communicate. Effectively what is taking place. They are a high-risk group. And we won't get into what happens after they matriculate out of Stella Maris because
Exactly.
there's nothing in place.
Exactly.
But I do want to say this. If I am a parent and I want to be as proactive as possible, if Stella Maris is doing what they can, if whatever institution I have my child is doing the best they can to educate them, but I really want to help to protect my child from any form of sexual assault or violence, what can I do? What are some of the ways? Can I go to BFLA and maybe we try to work out a solution together as to how to teach them to communicate, not that they don't want to be touched, they don't want to be violated, or their implications if, as an adult, they want to choose to involve in sexual activity?
Okay, definitely. We, BFLA, we are always here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And we want to work with parents. Just this morning, I was saying to Kylah, and I don't know, maybe they do, but for example, our court system, is there a person trained to work with the judiciary system, to represent or to interpret for persons with, especially persons who are mute,
Yes.
right? So even if a parent comes and she says, you know what, no, somebody molested my child, I want to go to the system. But you know, our court system is that the person has to provide the evidence.
Yeah.
Right? What do you do? So for BFLA, we want to reach out to such parents.
Yeah.
We are prepared if with the help of Stella Maris, if there are a group of parents, because I've done some session with parents before for Stella Maris. If Stella Maris wants us to organize and we can bring parents in, work with these parents because they are in a better position than we are to communicate certain things and some of the tell signs.
Yeah.
Right? We are prepared to do that, but we don't know who these parents are. We have to depend on Stella Maris, and you know, it's sad that we are such a reactive society.
Yeah, we are.
Right? Because I always go back to this young lady, Jackie, who, it was difficult for Jackie's family to keep her home. And it's always sad because we tend to want to always lock up our persons, right?
We still have that
But
situation.
exactly,
in the country,
right. And somebody impregnated Jackie. And her child then became the responsibility of her family.
Yeah.
Imagine you having a challenge. You don't even understand when you go to the clinic the importance of prenatal, and it becomes even harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And so that is for the girl, but then imagine a young boy finding himself in a situation where he's being exploited.
Yeah. You know, and that's one of the things that I wanted to jump on, because they are reverse roles, and it is common in today's day and age, and you know, there's not a lot that is being done. We advocate, yes. What's the approach to young teenage guys? And I'll give another scenario like you guys have done. Not too long ago, my child was in the hospital, and we were there for a few nights, and they were 1, 2, 3 teenage fathers trying to take care of their child. And because the child is crying or screaming, they don't have the patience to deal with this child. And there was one incident where a mother was in there with her child, and that child was, I think it was about 11 or 12, and she was calling him a punk because he was afraid for the needle and the conversation coming out of the mouth. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the reason why we've got nuisance out there, because of the conversation that is being held around these children. It's so sad. So what do we do? What's the approach to our young men who are out there who are only teenagers and they're having children? What?
I think that is impressive as a young person, taking up that role to be a father, you know, because for a female, you can't escape that responsibility really, you know. So for young fathers, I will appeal to them, you know, come to us at BFLA and talk to us, and we will be able to help you with those parenting sessions as well, helping you to understand the importance of language and communication, you know, and even taking it at that personal level, because as a young person, your life is already challenging. Now you are a young parent, you know, so that is additional responsibilities for you that you may not be able to deal with on an emotional level, you know. And so for us, we're welcoming young people like that to come in, to have a conversation, to build a relationship, you know, with persons like us at BFLA that can help you through this process.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we would want to reach them even before they become a father.
Yes.
You know, and going back to our peer education program, I can think about a number of young men who, from our peer education program from EP York, and I'm always so proud of them, because not one of them so far has become a father. Right? And I can recall 2 of them having graduated as a virgin, the males, you know, and when they would share and they are being pressured and all that, and then I'm like, you know, let's like go have fun other ways. And so I want to appeal to everybody, teacher, everybody who would listen. Right? When we engage in the discussion around sex and sexuality, it's not the green light. We are not telling you to go out there and have sex. We're teaching you to make responsible choices. And if you have the information, if you are equipped with the information, you will make the choices. Because nobody out there wants to be denied, especially a young person, be denied the opportunity to enjoy his or her life because they know they have to stay home and take care of a child. Nobody. Right?
You know, and I think what that also highlights as well, and it's a very valid point, I think that John brought up. So often when we talk about this topic, we're talking about what we need to tell girls. Is your program, it seems that way by what you're saying with your students from EP York, it's geared towards the collective responsibility. And boys have a responsibility. And girls have a responsibility as well.
Right. You know, there was a time, because BFLA, as we are part of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, and we have the youth advocacy movement. And there was a time when BFLA was the only family planning association in the entire region that had more males in their youth program than females. And regardless of what we say, against everything that we say, our young men are crying out for help.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
They are crying out, and we are not answering to that cry.
And I think, again, going back to the experience that John shared, it starts from their children.
Exactly. Sometimes when I would go over to our NHI clinic and I would see a father sitting there at the clinic with the baby, I congratulate him. Because no matter what, our males, they're trophy for their children. Not touch one man picnic.
No.
You know,
and go close to the car.
Right. I hear, you know, like especially when you find some males who don't know or didn't experience what it is to be raised by a male. the role that a male plays in their life
Yeah.
when they have their kids. Trust me. You know, for some of them, they want to do everything
Yeah.
Yes.
for their child. And so how do we teach them?
Yeah.
Because we do not prepare them for fatherhood. No matter what we say, we do not prepare them for fatherhood. So, yes, they can't deal with the screaming child. There was a time when we used to teach, when I was at HECOPAV at the Ministry of Health, we used to teach males how to help the woman to breastfeed.
Yeah.
So the woman don't have to get up when the baby they cry. All the father does is to, when the mother is sleeping, take that breast out, and you as a father, you hold the breast to the
baby.
to the child whilst the mother sleeps.
Of course.
So I think there are many different areas identified, and we have to wrap up the conversation. So let's take the opportunity to talk about what lies ahead for 2018 for BFLA, and some of the programs people can access.
Okay. We depend quite a bit on support from our international donors and even some of our local partners. And for the past maybe 4 years, we have been focusing a lot on sustainability, right? Because we want to ensure that BFLA becomes an organization that can stand on its own.
Of course.
This is something that has been recognized by our board of directors. And so a lot is being put into sustainability for the next 3 or 4 years, starting this year. Come April, I think agricultural show is going to be April. The board of directors has decided to do an annual raffle of a house.
Wow.
Right, so we're going to do the launch at the agricultural show, and I really want to give shout up and thanks to Premier Housing, right, because they have really worked with us on this, and to recognize the efforts of the board. So we'll be launching that, as I said, at the agricultural show for 2019, and so 2018. So 2019, we will do the raffle.
Yeah.
We'll
So
do
you
the
have 1 year of
drawing,
getting
right?
people to
And then that
buy
starts the next raffle for 2020.
Okay.
So every year we'll
Every
do
year.
it that way.
Nice.
And we have recognized that our young persons, even the small fee that BFLA charges, many young persons cannot afford. So a portion of that will be allotted, I think we said either 15 or 20% of the income generated by the association will be put aside to provide subsidized services for our young persons. So that's one of the big things. Also, presently we are renting the space that we have in Dangriga, even though we had a very nice piece of land. So we have just purchased a new clinic building to Dangriga, because when we look at the mixed report, there are several reports coming out saying, hey, much needs to be done
Yeah.
in Dangriga. And I said to Kylah, as a young person coming out of Dangriga, even though she works here, you know, she the Dangriga gal, you know, right? And she understands the dynamic. She understands. So we really, along with Power and many other, and the other organizations in Dangriga. So we'll be doing quite a bit of work in this stand, because we must reduce some of these data.
Of course.
Right.
In addition to that, we will be continuing to promote comprehensive sexuality education and reaching out to educators, to teachers, and doing more teacher training with them. Also reaching out to high schools. We work with a number of high schools already, but we want to increase that number in helping them to even strengthen their peer educators program. One high school has even asked for assistance with peer counseling, which is, really important as well. And so we're going to be engaging in that, expanding the youth advocacy movement, strengthening it, getting more young people involved in sexual health, and doing some work with True Humana in terms of human rights and sexual rights in Southern Stann Creek as well. and strengthening our partnerships with other departments that work with young people and different populations of young people so that we're able to expand our reach and to give young people accurate information.
Great job.
Yeah,
Right.
we really want to do some work with the media. Right, and I had a discussion with a colleague of mine from the Caribbean, and actually I had a person from another media house who participated in a media training through our federation in St. Lucia last year.
Okay.
And what we want to do is to do a collection of some of the stories that were done in this country, of course in our area, and play it back and have our reporters or journalists or whatever we call listen, and for us to really ask, like, really? Did we really ask that person that question, or did we really say that? Right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that we want to do, because I feel that and I know the media has to search stories and what is the sexiest stories and all the rest of it, but I feel that more and more we have to hold the media accountable.
Yes.
Because sometimes certain things are blown out of proportion because of the way they're being reported.
Yeah.
Right? So it is an investment that we want to do. We have formed, and BFLA is a part of it, is the Caribbean Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. And it fits right into the a regional initiative which our First Lady she's taking that baton, she's leading, right? Where we look at every Caribbean woman, every Caribbean child,
Yeah.
as well as the CARICOM initiative for the reduction of adolescent pregnancy. So definitely we will be reaching out to the media. We know some media houses will not respond, but we know the responsible ones will respond.
Well, we're glad that we can have you here as we continue. It is an important conversation that needs to happen, and I think that the more we allow for the information to be discussed, especially in manners like this, then people perhaps start to understand that you're not just talking about teenagers having sex. There's so much more to the
Exactly.
conversation. Rights, respect, and some of the things that we know are taking place in our country. So we
And the
really
responsibility of adults who are having sex with children.
Absolutely. So we want to thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And having this conversation with us today. And hopefully parents feel a bit more empowered to sit down with their children and tell them the necessary information that they need to make decisions in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back,
When we come back, we'll be joined by Jenny Lovell. So stay tuned.